It's a pleasure to be here, and my name is Grant Prince. I'm the head of our SME portfolios at Vitola, and I'm really happy to be part of this discussion this afternoon with these very special individuals that are leading the charge in corporate innovation and partnerships at their respective organizations. So it's a pleasure for me to introduce Bridget Evans, the director of SAB Foundation. She's leading a massive portfolio in growing and developing entrepreneurship across the country. They've got multiple national entrepreneurship programs. Next to her is Charles Wyeth. Thank you, Charles, for being part of this. And so Charles leads the EST portfolio at Distell as well, and he's been in this space, active in the startup ecosystem for a number of years, and we're pleased to be able to draw on his wisdom here this afternoon. And then at the end, we've got Henry Matthijs. Henry, pronounced that right? Also pleased to have Henry. Some of you might know him. Henry he's a social impact manager at the Vienna Waterfront. So yeah, we're gonna try and keep it. We've got a script here with us. And I think in thinking about this topic, for me, I think it sort of struck me that we've been through quite significant change in the last 3 years. I think we're in the third iteration of 2020, and the rate of change is so rapid, and the rate at which corporates respond to change is even more important. And the opportunity for corporates to turn the wheels a bit quicker maybe lies in the interaction with the startup ecosystem. And so that's why I feel really kind of excited for this conversation and to hear what our panelists have to say. So to the first question, Bridget, SAB Foundation is one of the leading organizations in entrepreneurial development. What is your approach at SAB to developing entrepreneurs and small businesses in the country?
So I think in terms of the foundation, we have a very specific mandate around entrepreneurship. And I think over the years, what we've tried to do is, as we've started to recognize where the gaps are in terms of service delivery, we've tried to plug those gaps. So initially, we had 2 big programs. One was in social innovation, one was in entrepreneurship, and that was all we did. But then over time, and I think this is where continuous feedback is so important. So we really encourage entrepreneurs to give us continuous feedback so that we can learn and change things that they feel are not actually working for them. So I think that is something that we've done well. And so we implemented 2 more things. One at the very early stages, so actually as people are starting a business. And then we also developed something else that follows on from our major programs, all because we started to recognize that, once they've completed our program, where do they go next? And the challenges around accessing finance and access to markets and all of that, they still, even though they've done really well, they still struggle with those issues. So that's kind of how we've innovated and developed and shifted what we've done. It's all been in response to where we start to recognize that entrepreneurs need further support. And I think that kind of, you're always stuck with the, breadth versus depth.
Depth, yeah.
And, I think we've really chosen the depth approach and really trying to, I always say, help people realize their potential, whatever that potential is. And that means, you've got to stick with them. You can't just do something and walk away. And we never officially walk away.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's wonderful, Bridget. So your approach has evolved and changed in response to the real-time feedback that you are getting from the entrepreneurs that you were working with.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you for that. Henry, I'll go to you next. So you leading social impact at the Vienna Waterfront. Do you want to give us a snapshot of, what your initiatives look like, and maybe, an example of, how you guys are innovating the changes that, you're starting to see come through?
Sure. Firstly, good afternoon, everybody. Grant, to the team at the Global Startup Awards, thank you very much for having us. And lastly, before I get going, I'm very sad that we didn't get the really cool music as we were coming down the stairs.
Yeah, I mean,
It really felt like here comes the corporate, boo, boring. But allow me to contextualize first who and what the Vienna Waterfront is, because some people might be asking, what's a shopping center doing on a panel discussion about startups?
yes.
In actual fact, we're a little bit more than a shopping center. We're a property development. We own all of the land. It's about 123 hectares of land from the moment you turn right on that awful highway interchange all the way through to Grand Beach and everything in between. We manage the property. We own the land. Everything from managing the roads through to the businesses on the property. We've got 800 tenants, small, big businesses across a variety of sectors. And the unique differentiator for us is that we're privately owned. We're owned by Growthpoint and the Public Investment Corporation, but it's managed like a public space. So it's a little mini neighborhood of the city with approximately 26,000 people. Pre-COVID, well, hopefully they come back, that work at the Vienna Waterfront each day. But the real meaningful opportunity is the 26 million people that visit the Vienna Waterfront precinct every year. So I can talk to you about our supply chain today and empowering small businesses to access the supply chain, but it's really the value that small businesses can find in accessing the market, those people that are spending the money every day. But here comes the kicker, the ability to test and prototype across our precinct. Now, across markets globally, innovation has often been stifled by bureaucracy and particularly by government red tape. I think of the challenges Uber had coming into markets globally. I see that Caitlin now has taken a coffee break, but a couple of years back, Laudela and ourselves were talking about e-hailing scooters coming into the city of Cape Town, and they were finding it so hard to work with the local or provincial government about how they could create policy that could govern this new innovative technology to come into the city. And in the end, that entity chose to not invest into emerging markets because of the challenges that they were facing. So what we offer to startups within this realm is the opportunity to prototype. We are fortunate that we manage private space, but in a public manner. And that gives us the opportunity to try things out. It gives us the room. We're not hampered by the Public Finance Management Act to invest in opportunity. We want to be a platform for innovation. We want to be a space where people try really, really cool stuff. That was actually supposed to be a different word, but I've pulled myself back a little bit there. But that's really market access. Then we've got 500 small businesses across our precinct, across a few sectors, food, the retail industry, the oceans economy. And what we've done is we've looked at sectors of the economy where meaningful job creation can be enabled. But this is also sectors that intersect, where business opportunity intersect with social need. And there we've really looked to enable access to market through sort of lowering our barriers to entry. We've got a whole range of incubation programs that we support across our precinct. And then the last element is really around building resilience into that small businesses across our precinct. So I think that this has not been more true than during this last 2 years. Particularly the tourism and hospitality sector, these 480 SMMEs operating across our precinct really took a serious dip. And our ability to, our balance sheet to sort of absorb that challenge, provide rent relief, provide working capital to SMMEs, provide mentorship and coaching and access to technical services was really, our shareholders said that's resilience for us. It's useless. This precinct opens up at the back end of COVID with, 70% of our small businesses not there.
Yeah.
So we want to be a platform, but we also want to empower and build resilience for our small businesses.
That's awesome, Henry. I love the fact that, as small business owners, you can go there and you can experiment or test, if you have new innovations in the safety of the precinct,
It's
right?
not easy, eh?
Well, well, you're saying that you're not faced with as much regulation or restrictions because of the private ownership of the precinct and allowing your entrepreneurs to be able to kind of pilot their new technologies. That's awesome. I also love the fact that, in response to COVID and the changes that you've seen happening, you've been able to almost provide additional assistance to your 480 beneficiaries. So that's really awesome, and I'm sure there's some lessons learned that came out of that that might be worth sharing in the next segment. So Bridget, your kind of initiatives have grown and evolved in response to the gaps and the changes. Henry, you guys are doing some really kind of real stuff with allowing startups to test and innovate and kind of come up with new solutions that could be useful for you guys as well as an organization. Charles, you've been pioneering some really kind of interesting initiatives in the space, in the startup space through ESD and supplier development. As a corporate, what is the method, or what are some of the kind of, how do you go about developing and implementing new innovative solutions? Like, what are the things that you look for? Why would you innovate as a corporate within your area of responsibility or within your portfolio?
Thanks, Grant, and good afternoon to all the participants here at the summit. With the kind of pressure that corporates have been under over the past few years, and in particular because of the COVID pandemic, we have all been forced to re-look at our budgets, re-look at our operating systems, re-look at every aspect of our business and find ways of doing a lot more with a lot less. And that immediately becomes a key driver for innovating everything regarding your business. Look, we've been the one most hated industry by government during the pandemic, and that's why they gave us 4 bans, which nearly took away half a year's worth of trading. So we've had extra pressure on us, but that's not uncommon. I think everybody, Henry mentioned the whole tourism sector as well, being under such pressure because of the pandemic and government's response to it. But this has then forced us to relook at everything that we do. And beyond the big corporate sort of IT platforms that we operate on, within the different departments, within our different category lines and programs, we've been working very closely with a lot of small business to review, first of all, how we engage our customers, how we engage our clients, and looking at all the different aspects of our operations. And you'll be amazed how many innovations we've had over the past 3 years in particular. There's nothing like a little bit of hardship or a crisis that forces people to immediately get off their butts and start thinking even more innovatively around the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
And in that regard, we found ideas coming from within the organization, from our customers, and also from our top management. And the one thing that has been a key driver has been finding the right sort of corporate sponsor. Because no matter how innovative your idea is, or even an entrepreneur approaching us with a brilliant idea, the amount of loops and hurdles you're going to jump over to get it to the finish line is enormous. But when you get the right kind of internal corporate sponsors or a senior executive sponsor behind an idea, it immediately starts to flow. And we found this kind of relationship developing, and even our executives becoming so much more responsive to ideas. So simple things around in the townships where we've been operating and doing training on with the taverners. In the past, we would get people into a hall and run training in an event, in a venue like this. Now we're using it through an app. They take through the QR coding, you get beautiful animated tutors giving you all sorts of lessons on how to manage your tavern better. to improve efficiencies and lower cost in that particular environment. And that kind of logic has spilled over through all aspects of our business. And even the way we move our products from one point to another, all these innovations have been absolutely fantastic and have helped us to weather the storm quite comfortably over the past 2 years in particular.
Thanks very much, Charles. Appreciate that. Just to any of the, maybe to all of you, sitting where you sit, what is the kind of triggers or what are the key success factors that need to be in place in order for a new idea to kind of pass the test? So maybe you do an annual review, or you get there's some survey feedback and you're thinking, okay, we need to do something about this. What are the kind of, do you need to get sign-off from the CEO? What are maybe just a few of the kind of things that have to be in place before the budget can be passed, or, the check can be put into the bank?
Well, I think in my case, I'm very fortunate in that SAB Foundation is a separate legal entity, and so really any kind of innovation really has to go through the board. And because I'm so old now, I've been there so long, almost 8 years, I think there is a level of trust and respect amongst the board that I am going to bring them new and interesting things. So actually it's never been a challenge for me. But often what we'll do is we'll try something new as an experiment. So, before we actually decide that this is something we want to incorporate for the long term, we will run something like a pilot. So for example, last year SAB actually asked us if we could, because we've had so much success with the Social Innovation Awards, and that, we've got all the processes in place and the application forms and all of that it's such a seamless process. We thought, well, what else can we do with this process? And so we said SAB asked if we could help them with try and address the alcohol harm issue. And so we ran a pilot, and I think we learned so much from that pilot. And in fact, out of the 5 companies that we awarded funding to, we put 3 of them together and said that you're only going to get this funding if the 3 of you work together. And then we got top sort of behaviorists, people who deal with alcohol harm issues every day. And so they're working with them to make sure that this is really addressing the need that exists. But we have to see how it goes, and once it's actually implemented, to decide whether or not that was a once-off or whether it's going to be something we do again.
That's awesome, Bridget. So, so there is an appetite to do it at a small scale, to test it and see that it works, and then potentially roll it out at a larger scale.
Yeah.
I know that for a lot of entrepreneurs, you come and you say, our solution's going to solve the world's problems, or this app, or this, technology is going to address a challenge that the entire market is facing. But I think those proof points and those test points are really critical in order to, make it compelling for a corporate, an investor, or anybody else, that you're wanting to partner with you in commercializing or sort of launching your technology into the market.
Sorry, can I just follow that up and just say this is something I feel very strongly about, is that a corporate foundation like ourselves, we're in such a fortunate position because we have a very specific mandate. Not only that, but the foundation is set up so it's intended to go on in perpetuity, which means that you can really design long-term strategies that work. You don't have that constant, you don't have the pressure of, often internally, there's almost trends in development where, at one stage everyone's funding orphan care, then they're funding education, then it's climate change, you know, that kind of thing. It continually influences strategy. So what these foundations, and there's a number of them, is this focused strategy. And for me, it's in a position like ours, there is a very important combination of consistency and innovation.
Okay.
Because I think that in order for you to be able to achieve something, or really see if you've achieved anything, you need to be consistent over time, and you actually need to track entrepreneurs for a long period of time to understand. So we track for 5 years at least. But if we kept changing service providers, you know, and changing our idea of what we were doing, and I've seen this happen a lot, you know, is I don't think we would have achieved what we have achieved. So I think it is definitely consistency on the one hand, but innovating as well.
That's beautiful. You can write that down. Consistency as well as innovation. But I love that aspect of time and allowing something to kind of to hit the mark, you know, and to work its way through the system. Because sometimes maybe your solution is ahead of the market or ahead of, you know, the customer that you're trying to solve the problem for, or even the corporate that you're trying to solve the problem for. So I love that insight, Bridget. Charles, Henry, you know, so Bridget's sort of sitting at a foundation level and with a specific hat on. For you guys, what is the appetite for introducing new things into your organizations? Is it
It's hard. So I don't know. We unfortunately don't have the luxury of a foundation, and I haven't been around for as long as. So I've got to nag the CEO quite often to get things done. But I think what's critical to us is, or I should say two things. Is one is shared value. And the second is alignment with strategy. And I think the third one, Charles, a very pragmatic colleague on the left, mentioned at the outset of his conversation about corporate sponsorship, about getting the right person to drive innovation in your business. But if I had to start with shared value, very quickly, showcasing the principle of value for the organization, value for society, value for the environment is absolutely critical. We've embedded it into our business strategy, which makes the opportunity to invest into resources to support small businesses, to support social development a whole lot easier. And that's why strategy is key. From the top down, your board, the CEO, the executive level, there needs to be buy-in. And whilst we've adopted a very innovative approach, I see my colleague Heather is sitting in the audience, and she can attest to on a daily basis when you're stuck in the mud and everybody's doing the day-to-day, and you come and say, oh, here's something really cool for us to test and prototype with, but it's not aligned to, 7% revenue growth or 12% revenue growth. It's a little bit harder, which is why if it's enabled by a business strategy that thinks a little bit further than just the single bottom line, to think about societal and environmental value, it does go a lot further, and then getting the right person to nag the CEO at the right time.
So out of those three, economic, social, and environmental, which one matters the most? Is it the earning more revenue for the organization,
I think it's
saving the cost?
potentially subjective to people, to certain people, it can be the environment. We've got a planet with limited resources. A very few in a couple hundred years are going to be able to escape to Mars. Some of us are not going to have that benefit. So environment's probably key. Without people, you aren't serving a community. You do not operate in a vacuum, and it's critical for corporates and corporate citizens to understand that we've got to take the lead. We've got to think about the impact that we're having on the communities around us. If there is no community to serve, to have a glass of wine in the evening or beer after that, there doesn't exist the Distell or SAB. So you've got to ensure that that community is, and then the economic benefit comes.
Perhaps, Grant, just to add on to what Henry has summed up so beautifully around shared value, from an entrepreneur's perspective, if it's approaching a corporate with regard to an innovative idea, it's really about saying and looking at those items around the cost saving immediately. What difference is it going to make in your client's life? The lady in front made the comment, read from Sun Tzu, around knowing your enemy and knowing yourself. I mean, certainly you have to know your client in
Yeah.
that particular case, to see how the innovation could save costs or improve service or deliver on one of those other social benefits or corporate benefits that the company is seeing, and being able to articulate it very clearly
Yes.
in the kind of language that that company wants to hear. Then the appetite for innovation is very, very receptive.
I love that, Charles, because it is something that we teach entrepreneurs on a daily basis, is to really understand their customer deeply and to know how their product or service solves a pain point or a problem for that customer. So I think when we think about access to market or collaborating with corporate partners, it really is about what is the link, or where do you connect, and how do you create value for both. So not just, because sometimes as small businesses, we're like, oh, I need access to market, and let me go into Distell supply chain or SAB supply chain, and it's going to solve my problems. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it becomes harder, as a small business, for you to cope in that supply chain, because the requirements become a lot higher.
Oh, yes.
So Charles, maybe just on that, you mentioned that obviously, and we all know that the impact of the lockdowns on the beverage sector, how did you, what were the strategies that you guys sort of looked at to get through that period? And I know that you managed to maintain a lot of your successes and achieve some great stuff in that period. How important was collaboration and partnerships, either with small businesses or with other organizations, for you during that period? And maybe can you give us an example of two of what that looked like?
Sure. A quick one. Grant, we realized when our profits started falling away to almost nothing 2 years ago, we cannot continue to do the work that we were doing on our own. And immediately we found we needed to partner with other organizations and with other entities. And in the past, you would find us and our dear competitor next door to me would never put our two banners next to each other at any event. Yet, you would find then we are now jointly supporting certain farmers because there's an enormous shortage, let's say, within the apples sector, to get more apple producers so that we can make the delicious Savannah that you all enjoy so much. So that's one example. Within the townships is another example where we've been working with the waste pickers between us, the City of Cape Town, and Nedbank, to come up with a highly integrated model that really leverages each other's resources and capacity to enhance impact. 600 jobs created, 50 buyback centers supported, and so on. So it's really about using each other's resources and leveraging each other's skills and networks to be able to achieve more with a whole lot less.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Charles. I love that. Henry, I know that, at the Waterfront, you and your team, one of your part of your mission is to lower barriers for entry for entrepreneurs and for small businesses. How are you working with the tenants at the precinct to lower those barriers to entry? And maybe can you give us an example of some of the ones that you're really excited about and that have really worked well for you?
I'm going to answer in maybe two parts. There's work you can do with the small business, but as corporates, the first thing you need to do is understand the status quo within your organization. And often we build barriers based on misconceived notions of what procurement should look like or what product should look like in a specific space, how the leasing process should work. If you want to open a restaurant at the Vienna Waterfront a couple of years back, you'd need a perfect 10-page pitch presentation with 3-year sales projections, saved on a PDF and sent not from a Gmail account. It needs to come from an organization.
Yeah.
So it starts with you as an institution, understand what barriers you're creating for particularly small black-owned businesses to access that market opportunity. But then you need to put really pragmatic approaches in place to build a pipeline, which is what we've done in a few key sectors. And I'll use the food sector as an example. Our goal is to be ethical, sustainable, just, support health and well-being, but also support diversity and inclusion as well. And for a long time, we were seeing the same operators coming into the market, utilizing and making benefit of the market access at the space like the Vienna Waterfront. So a few years ago, we initiated a project and we built a kitchen incubator, which is actually the physical infrastructure. One of the key barriers for a small, let's call it a small samosa maker, doing 50 samosas on a Sunday morning or a Saturday evening for the neighbors, to scale up to producing 10,000 for pick and pays across the city.
Nice.
The biggest barrier there is infrastructure, deep fryer, oven.
Yeah.
So we built the infrastructure, the commercial kitchen at Maker's Landing, and then we sort of built development programs on top of that. A kitchen incubator program, which is a 2-year incubation program, and through that program are now funneling a new cohort of potential tenants into our precinct alone. But that doesn't end there, and I want to touch on the collaboration. We aren't the be-all and the end-all for each one of those businesses. It's very important for us to then build better routes to market than just the waterfront, which is potentially a small food business trading at neighbor goods market on a Saturday or a Sunday. It's very critical for us to understand that, you know, there is a market outside of the waterfront that we need to empower businesses to access. So we've got programs in the retail, craft and design sector, within our supply chain, of course, the oceans economy we support as well.
Awesome. I love that. Thanks for that, Henry. And I just wanted to share something that Henry said was that they actively work to help the beneficiaries or the entrepreneurs on the precinct to diversify the market opportunity, right? So not just having them as the kind of single customer or source of revenue, but having others. And I think for young innovators, new businesses, that's very important. We interact with procurement managers looking for small business to absorb into their supply chains. The first thing they look for is what is your revenue forecast, or what does your projections look like for the next 2 or 3 years. So do you have other customers or, you know, market segments that you're going to work with other than us, so that we know you're able to supply us in a reliable manner. So if you're looking to kind of partner with a corporate and present them with the innovative solutions that's going to solve a business challenge for them, you know, kind of make sure that the vehicle that you're kind of running the business with is solid, and that you have that kind of diversified income stream in mind as well. Bridget, so, you know, how compelling, and I mean the guys talked about collaboration and partnerships that have worked for them. You know, how compelling is collaboration for the SAB Foundation? And can you give us an example of, you know, where you're collaborating or partnering with others that's allowing you to achieve your mandate or to deliver impact at scale?
Sure. So I think the first few years were really about building the foundation internally. But as I mentioned, what we started to see was that we put entrepreneurs through this program, different programs, but at the end of those programs, they really still struggle to access markets and access finance. And so we've been really grappling with how do we make that happen? And I mean, we've had some small collaborations before. We partnered with Pick and Pay with some farmers a while ago. But I think what started to really become apparent to me is that there's this gap in providing finance to small businesses. So either the finance costs are so expensive they can't afford it, or the banks just don't want to lend to them. So we are now collaborating. It's taken kind of years to, I would say, come to fruition. But at the moment, we are in the process of raising a fund. So that's a collaboration between ourselves, Jobs Fund, CIFA, and another private company, where we're trying to set up a fund that will allow entrepreneurs to access affordable finance. And most of it's just for cash flow funding, because we've recognized that that is such a major obstacle, is that they have this order a confirmed order, but they can't access cash flow to be able to service that order. And so, so this is hugely exciting for me. So we could never have done this on our own. So what we see is we will continue to develop this pipeline of businesses that come through the foundation, and at the end of it all, there's a fund that's been set up, and it's external to us, and we intend that fund, we're going to hopefully raise more money into that fund over time, but we think we've de-risked this pipeline of businesses because we've gotten to know them so well, we've put them through a lot of training, and so now they will have access to finance at the end of it. So that collaboration is absolutely critical, and I'm also collaborating with I'm in 2 different working groups. The one is called Impact Investing South Africa, and that is what role can foundations play in impact investing. And then also I'm in another working group which is for all the other corporate Black economic empowerment foundations that have been set up. Same thing, how can we work together to achieve more than we can achieve on our own? And so we're all talking a lot. I don't think we've reached the point yet where we're actually physically working together on things, but I think that will come over time.
Yeah. So you're seeing the momentum is definitely picking up in the development space, and even among corporates.
Yeah.
There's a greater appetite to work together and collaborate to deliver impact at scale.
Yeah, and I think really, when your mandates are aligned, it makes so much sense, And we have what's the name of that organization now? Innovation Edge.
Yeah.
So Innovation Edge is part of the DG Murray Trust, and they fund anything to do with early childhood development, but it's quite broad. And so they will come to us and say, listen, please can we access your pipeline? Because there's so much overlap between what you're doing and what we're doing. And people do that with us all the time, and we share information continually. Some want farming businesses, others want health, so we see that as part of our role from a market access point of view and from a access to finance point of view. So I think collaboration is always important.
Awesome. I definitely agree, Bridget. I think, personally, my view, more and more, I'm starting to believe that it takes a village to raise a business in South Africa. Well, depending on what kind of business you have, but particularly if, access to opportunity is a bit, far away from you. So collaboration, definitely, I think if we're going to solve the unemployment crisis, or at least not solve it, but, start addressing it, working together is smarter than working in our little silos and figuring stuff out. I think the gentleman said, was it 0 of 100%? Or 100% of 0 is really nothing at all. But if we can kind of put our muscle together, we can achieve more. Henry, okay. Thanks, Bridget.
I just see the big red sign.
Okay, well.
Sorry, maybe I
Sorry.
hogged
One last thing, because we were 20 minutes in. Is there any kind of last thoughts that you wanted to leave with the
Sorry,
audience?
the time's up. I don't have any last thoughts. No, look, I think a lot of it has been said, but the last bit maybe on collaboration, because it's a very tight rope to walk, and it's not easy. Bridget mentioned if your values aligned, I certainly believe you're a long way down the road, but your budgets might not align, personalities in the industry might not align. The hot topic, it could this week be the circular economy, the next week there's an acceleration program happening on, waste generation. These things ebb and flow. If there's one sort of parting thought that I'd had is the staying the course, and I think it was mentioned in the previous discussion as well. A number of partnerships that we have built, has been built over years, and often I'd meet somebody and there's people in the room, I'm sure we should do something together, and that together often happens 3 two, 3 years down the line when the worlds align. So I'd just say sort of stay the course and ensure your name keeps on popping up. You're still part of the ecosystem. You haven't given up because tomorrow it might just be a 100 million rand supply contract at Distell for bottle caps.
Yes. Awesome. Thanks, Henry. Charles, I'll give the last word to you.
Just one quick comment, and actually it flows on what Enrico, one of the panelists on the previous session, made a comment to me about how difficult it sometimes is to reach senior people in corporates nowadays, and particularly within South Africa. And I think that there's a change in the market at the moment. There's a change in corporates at the moment. With the nightmare we've all just gone through, I think a lot of corporates, I think a lot of companies and entrepreneurs are being a lot more receptive. So take Henry's advice and stay the course, because I think there is a change taking place at the moment. The time for innovation, it really is now, because we have felt the consequences of hardship, and I think people are being a lot more receptive at the moment.
Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you so much, Bridget. Thank you, Henry, for being here and for your great insights. Thank you to the organizers, and thank you to you all for listening.
Thank you.